tax policy, people get bogged down in the math, they get bogged down in the numbers, and frankly, that can lose a lot of people in the discussion. Their eyes glaze over, and so I wanted to turn this entire debate around and make the film about the moral case against the income tax, and make it about real flesh and blood people, and not, something people would never forget when the stories were real.
Well, I think it's important also to know, how can the audience do more than just come to a film? Because, that's great to come see a very powerful and compelling film. But if we walk away from here informed but not involved, that doesn't help. How do we stay involved?
Well, one of the other things we have is we have this movie available on DVD. We have our pre-orders available right now. You can go to our website, unfairmovie.com, right now. Because you all went the extra mile and came out tonight for this special event, and for those in our social media universe, we will offer a discount on the DVD using the promo code LIVE. That's L-I-V-E.
Now, Craig, I understand there's also a book that goes along with it.
That's right, Governor. We have the book Unfair, the movie, in book form. And it's going to give you a more in-depth look into the stories from the film that we just couldn't capture in 90 minutes.
Let me introduce you now to our panel. From the Heritage Foundation, economist Steve Moore, who is also a Fox News contributor. Former United Nations Ambassador Alan Keyes. Also, formerly with the Christian Coalition and now with the Faith and Freedom Coalition, Ralph Reed. He's on remote. And from the Voices Action, Adriana Boyne. All right, panel, let's get underway with an update on one of these stories. Adriana, I want you to give us an update on your status.
Yes, Governor, as you could see in the movie, for many years, the IRS put a lot of difficulty for me to do the organization. So we gave up on the 501c3 bosses after a lot of money is spent, but we continue with bosses action. I have to ask my own Congressman Pete Sessions to intercede, to sign a release so he could try to investigate what was going on. This was before we find out that there were several other groups, as we can see in the movie, who were also experiencing the same situation. So it was hard for us, especially for a nonprofit that is small, when we're trying to raise funds to continue. My organization is to educate and empower the Hispanic community with conservative issues, conservative public policy, the Constitution, and social and fiscal values. And it seems like the IRS have a problem with us trying to communicate these issues to the Spanish-speaking community in America, and also to those Hispanics who speak English as well. So it was very difficult, and certainly we're walking step by step. But I know that with this movie, it's fantastic that more people can open their eyes about what is going on with the IRS.
Adriana, thank you very much. Ralph, this isn't your first run-in with Lois Lerner and the Christian Coalition, so tell us what happened there.
Yes, Governor, I was executive director of the Christian Coalition in 1991 when there was a complaint filed against us before the Federal Election Commission complaining about our nonpartisan voter education programs. And Lois Lerner was then the director of enforcement for the Federal Election Commission. Over the course of the next 8 years, the Federal Election Commission sued the Christian Coalition for $5 million. It was the largest fine sought in the history of the agency, the largest lawsuit in the history of the agency. And they went after us simply because we were registering Christians to vote. We were encouraging them to become informed and educated on the issues. We were encouraging them to vote. And we were distributing nonpartisan voter guides in churches that told where the candidates stood on issues that affected them and their families. I think that ought to be encouraged, not discouraged. But under the FEC, before Lois Lerner left the FEC and moved to the IRS, we were sued for it. We spent over $2 million in legal bills fighting that lawsuit, and I'm pleased to be able to report that we won that case and were vindicated in a summary judgment by a liberal Democratic judge appointed by Jimmy Carter. And after the district court judge ruled, the Federal Election Commission declined to even appeal the case. So it tells you how specious the case really was. It was simple harassment, it was political persecution, and it was going on 20 years before this current scandal at the IRS.
Can you elaborate on what's happening now with religious freedom?
Well, for those of us who have dealt with the IRS over decades, and I have, this is really nothing new. I mean, everybody knows Lois Lerner's name, but believe me, this was going on long before Barack Obama was president and long before Lois Lerner was at the IRS. This is a rogue agency that for decades has been hamstrung by corruption, by political attacks and targeting, and especially by hostility towards evangelical Christians and organizations that share the gospel and seek to mobilize Christians to be effective citizens. When I was at the Christian Coalition, for 8 years, the IRS refused to grant us our tax-exempt status, even though all we were doing was registering Christians to vote and turning them out to the polls and urging them to contact their elected officials on pending public policy matters. I mean, that's what a 501c4 social welfare organization does, and they never granted us our tax status, even though they gave it to the Sierra Club, even though they gave it to Jesse Jackson's organization, even though they gave it to liberal organizations like MoveOn.org and others. It's been used to target Christians and Jews and others who stand for our values. They've gone after Zionist organizations. They've gone after pro-life organizations and asked those activists to describe the content of their prayers.
Alan, the moral case against income tax, is there one?
Well, I think the moral understanding is in fact at the heart of it. At the end of the day, liberty is about taking responsibility for yourself. And that sense of responsibility is probably the most important aspect of our practical moral character, what actually is the result of our understanding of our moral responsibilities. But if you take away an individual's wherewithal, control of their income, and the adequate material resources that they need to meet their responsibilities, what do? At the end of the day, you undermine the sense of responsibility because you have made it impossible to act according to that sense. So I think that the whole question of the income tax has its first bearing and maybe its worst consequence in terms of what it does to the moral character and sense of responsibility of our people.
Well, we've seen personal experiences, how it affects religious liberty, the moral case, but Steve, what about the economics of this issue?
Well, Governor, I think I first met you when we first collaborated on this issue, eliminating the income tax, and that's the personal income tax, the corporate tax, the capital gains tax, the dividend tax, all of it, and taxing people on their consumption, not what they put into their economy, which is their income and their entrepreneurship and their effort and their savings. You asked me what's the economic impact of doing that, getting rid of the income tax?
Yeah.
Rocket fuel. Rocket fuel for an economy that is not performing. And you know that this has been a recovery most Americans haven't felt. The average American hasn't had a pay raise in 6 years. Well, imagine what it means if all that money that's withheld from your paycheck is no longer taken out. So I think in terms of the economic impact, if I could wave a wand and do anything to get the economy moving faster and put America back to work, it would be to eliminate the income tax entirely. Wipe it out, by the way. It has to be completely eliminated, and we should probably repeal the 16th Amendment that created it in the first place.
You know, the sound that I'm hearing is the sound that I'm hearing from theaters all across America as people are cheering wildly with what you just said, because I think we understand the value of that. All right, Craig, fair tax, we believe is the answer. But we've got to have a Congress, a Senate, and a president that would help get this done. This is a bunch of people that passed Obamacare. So how hard could it be to get the fair tax passed?
We saw them pass Obamacare in a Congress. And when nobody thought that could be passed, now you can look at the fair tax and say it can be passed. I think that's the important thing to bring to the American people is it can be done. A lot of people say, well, I love the fair tax, but it can't happen. It takes 218 votes in the House, 51 votes in the Senate, and one president who can lead on that issue, and then it's done.
You know, I think that's an important point to make because I hear the same thing. Well, we'll never be able to get it done. We've seen some crazy things get done. This isn't crazy. This actually makes sense. I'm going to throw a question out to the audience who are watching in all of our theaters, all of